Daniel was not a man who asked for much from life. He only wished for peace and enough to feed and raise his children. Every morning he woke up before the sun, his body tired but his spirit unwilling to quit. His twins, Emma and Noah, were only 7 years old, full of laughter and questions about everything. They were the reason Daniel kept going, even when the weight of the world pressed hard on his shoulders. Daniel had once dreamed of living a simple family life with his wife Claire. They had met when he was working as a mechanic, fixing cars in a small shop. Claire came from a wealthy family who never accepted Daniel. They thought he was too plain, too poor, and not good enough for their daughter. But Claire had loved him for his honesty, his humor, and the way he always put people before himself. For a time, they built a little life together, not fancy but full of warmth. Then tragedy came too soon. Claire grew ill, and despite Daniel's prayers and efforts, she passed away, leaving him with the twins. Daniel's world broke apart that day. He promised himself he would never let Emma and Noah feel abandoned. He held them close at night when they cried for their mother and wiped his own tears quietly so they would not see his pain. For a short while after Claire's passing, Daniel's in-laws, the Westons, allowed him and the twins to stay in their large mansion. It was supposed to be a place of support, but instead, it became a place of daily humiliation. Mrs. Weston would glance at Daniel's worn-out shoes and sigh loudly, as if his poverty were dirt on her polished floor. Mr. Weston would call Daniel lazy, even though Daniel spent his days doing odd jobs and nights helping his children with homework. The children could feel the coldness too. Emma once whispered, "Daddy, why do Grandma and Grandpa not smile at us like they do at other people?" Daniel only hugged her and said, "Some hearts are hard to please, but that doesn't mean we are less." He tried to shield them, but children were wise enough to sense truth. It was one cold evening when everything fell apart. Daniel had worked late fixing an old car for a neighbor to earn a few dollars. He returned to the mansion with his hands covered in grease, his shirt damp with sweat. Mrs. Weston stood at the door, her face set in anger. "This cannot go on," she declared. "You are a burden. You cannot provide the life our daughter wanted for her children. You should leave." Daniel froze, his heart racing. The twins clung to his legs, their eyes wide. He pleaded softly, "Please, just a little more time. I am saving money." The children, but Mr. Weston cut him off sharply. "You are nothing. You drag our daughter's memory through the mud with your pitiful struggles. Take your children and go. We have done enough." Daniel felt as if the ground had disappeared under his feet. He had no plan, no safe place to go. But he also had no choice. That night, with only a small bag of clothes and trembling children at his side, he stepped out into the chilly air. The mansion door slammed behind him, a sound that echoed like final judgment. Emma cried softly, asking if they had done something wrong. Noah, trying to be brave, held his father's hand tighter and said, "It's okay, Daddy. We still have you." Daniel bent down, hugging them both tightly. His voice shook as he whispered, "We have each other, and that is enough." They walked through the dark streets, past glowing windows of families gathered at dinner tables. The twins shivered, and Daniel gave them his coat, though it left him cold. Finally, they found a bench near a small park. Daniel sat there with the twins leaning against him. He stroked their hair and hummed a lullaby that Claire once sang. The night felt long, but he stayed strong because his children needed him to. The next day, Daniel found a shelter run by kind volunteers. The rooms were crowded, but it was warm and safe. The twins shared a bunk bed, and Daniel slept on a thin mattress on the floor. It wasn't much, but he was grateful. Every morning he woke up early, prepared whatever food he could find, and walked the children to school. He packed their notebooks carefully, making sure they never felt less than any other child. Inside, though, Daniel carried a storm. He thought of how easily his in-laws had thrown them out, how little value they saw in him. He worried about the future, about whether he could really give Emma and Noah a good life. Still, when the twins looked at him, he forced a smile. He knew his strength was their anchor. One evening at the shelter, Emma asked him, "Daddy, are we poor?" Daniel paused, then smiled softly. "We don't have much money, sweetheart, but poor. No, poor is when you have no love, no kindness, and we have both." The twins nodded, holding him close. Daniel didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of a journey that would test him more than ever before. His in-laws believed they had cut him down to nothing, but they had no idea about the secret waiting for him in the shadows of his past. Somewhere far away, a lawyer was preparing papers, and a name, his name, was written on an inheritance worth more than Daniel could imagine. But for now, all Daniel had was faith in himself and the love of 2 children who believed their father was stronger than the world. Daniel slowly began to adjust to life in the shelter, though every day carried a fresh struggle. The morning started with noise from many families crammed into a small space. Children cried, mothers hurried, and fathers searched for jobs. Daniel tried to keep Emma and Noah shielded from the chaos. He combed Emma's hair carefully and helped Noah tie his shoelaces before school. He wanted them to walk out of the shelter with dignity, like any other children, not as if they belonged to a place where hope seemed scarce. After dropping them at school, Daniel searched for work. His hands were skilled from years as a mechanic, but few places were hiring. Some shop owners shook their heads, saying they had no money for extra workers. Others looked at his worn clothes and simply turned him away without hearing his story. Yet Daniel did not give up. He walked miles each day, knocking on doors, asking, "Do you need a hand with repairs? I can fix cars, machines, anything." Finally, one elderly man who ran a small repair shop agreed to let him work part-time. "The pay is little," the man warned, "but if you are honest and hard-working, there will always be something for you here." Daniel nodded with gratitude. Even a few dollars meant food for the twins. He worked long hours cleaning greasy tools, fixing engines, and sometimes sweeping the dusty floor. His hands grew rough, but his heart felt lighter knowing he could bring home bread and fruit for Emma and Noah. Evenings at the shelter were tough. Dinner was simple: soup, bread, and sometimes rice. The twins, though young, never complained. Emma often told her father, "This soup tastes nice, Daddy," just to see him smile. Noah would quietly slide a piece of bread toward his father, pretending he was full, because he noticed Daniel often gave most of his share to them. One night, as they sat together on their small bed, Emma asked, "Daddy, why don't Grandma and Grandpa love us?" Daniel's heart ached, but he kept his voice calm. "They don't understand what love is, my dear. Love is not about money or big houses. Love is about standing by each other no matter what." The twins hugged him tightly, and in that moment Daniel felt stronger than ever. At school, however, Emma and Noah began facing questions. Some classmates whispered about them living in a shelter. Kids can be unkind when they don't understand. Emma returned home one day with tears in her eyes. "They said we are poor beggars," she cried. Daniel knelt before her and said softly, "Do not believe those words. Rich or poor does not come from pockets, it comes from the heart. And our hearts are full." Despite the struggles, Daniel tried to bring moments of joy into their lives. On Sundays, when he had a few hours free, he took the twins to a park. They would play on the swings, laugh on the slides, and chase each other on the grass. Daniel sat nearby watching their smiles, promising himself that someday he would give them a home where laughter would not be shadowed by hardship. What Daniel did not know was that someone had already begun noticing his quiet strength. A lawyer named Mr. Grant had been following his life from a distance. He had been hired years ago to track Daniel's journey without revealing the reason. Mr. Grant often visited the shelter under the guise of helping with donations, but secretly, he was observing Daniel. He saw how Daniel never begged, never blamed others, and always put his children first. These were qualities that spoke louder than any wealth. One evening, when Daniel returned from work, he saw Mr. Grant talking with one of the shelter volunteers. Daniel thought nothing of it and continued toward his children. He lifted Emma into his arms and patted Noah's head, laughing at their stories from school. Mr. Grant quietly watched, noting the warmth in Daniel's tired eyes. Life remained difficult. Winter came, bringing cold nights that made the shelter feel like ice. Daniel wrapped the twins in every blanket he could find, holding them close. He often stayed awake, worried about their future, but each time he felt weak, he remembered Claire's smile and her last words to him. "Take care of our babies, Daniel. Never let them feel unloved." Those words gave him courage. One particular night, Daniel was repairing an old heater at the shelter when a young boy approached him. "Sir, my mom says you can fix things. Our heater is broken." Daniel followed the boy and spent hours repairing it. The grateful mother offered him a few dollars, but Daniel refused. "Just keep your children warm," he said. Word spread quickly about his kindness, and soon more people asked for his help. Some gave him food in return. Others gave small amounts of money. Slowly, Daniel became known in the shelter as the man who could fix anything. The in-laws, meanwhile, lived in comfort, not caring about what Daniel and the twins faced. They told neighbors that Daniel had left by choice, that he was unfit to raise children. They never imagined that their cruel actions would one day return to haunt them. For now, they believed they had erased him from their lives. But destiny had a different plan. The more Daniel endured, the stronger his character became. His humility and patience were shaping him into someone extraordinary. And far away, documents sat locked in Mr. Grant's office. Documents with Daniel's name on them, waiting for the right time to be revealed. For now, though, Daniel lived one day at a time. Every night before bed, he whispered to his twins, "Someday everything will be better. Until then, we hold each other, and that is enough." His words were simple, but they planted seeds of hope in the children's hearts. They believed him, because Daniel's love made them feel richer than anyone else. Daniel had no idea how close he was to a turning point. The struggle was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning of a journey that would soon lift him from the shadows into a life beyond his wildest dreams. Daniel's days continued in the same rhythm. Work during the day, shelter at night, and caring for Emma and Noah in between. He was tired but never allowed himself to complain. Every evening he told his children stories about their mother, about hope, and about the importance of kindness. To them, Daniel was not just a father, he was their hero, even if he himself felt weak at times. One chilly afternoon, while Daniel was fixing a broken bicycle for one of the kids at the shelter, a man in a dark suit walked up to him. The man carried a briefcase and looked different from the usual visitors. Daniel stood up quickly, unsure if he had done something wrong. The man smiled politely and said, "Mr. Daniel Hayes?" "Yes," Daniel answered slowly, wiping the grease from his hands. "My name is Mr. Grant," the man introduced himself. "I am a lawyer, and I have been asked to deliver something important to you. Could we talk privately?" Daniel felt his heart race. A lawyer? He immediately thought of his in-laws. Perhaps they were trying to take the twins away. Fear gripped him. But Mr. Grant's calm voice gave no sign of bad news. "Don't worry," he assured, noticing Daniel's unease. "It is not trouble. In fact, it is an opportunity." They sat in a small office at the shelter. Mr. Grant opened his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. He placed it in front of Daniel and said, "This letter will change your life. Please read it." With trembling fingers, Daniel opened it. The words seemed too big for him to believe. The letter stated that his late grandfather, a man Daniel had barely known, had left behind an estate worth more than $200 million, and Daniel was the rightful heir. Daniel blinked several times, reading the lines again and again. This must be a mistake," he whispered. "I don't have such a family. My father left when I was a boy. I grew up with nothing." Mr. Grant nodded. "Your grandfather was a wealthy businessman. He had no contact with your father after certain disagreements, but he always kept an eye on his bloodline. Before his passing, he instructed us to watch you quietly. He wanted to be sure that whoever inherited his wealth was a person of character, not greed. You, Mr. Hayes, have proven yourself without even knowing it." Daniel could not breathe for a moment. He thought of his life, the hunger, the shame from his in-laws, the endless struggle. Could it really be true that all this time, while he begged for small jobs and prayed for bread, his name was tied to such fortune? The twins entered the office just then, running to him after school. Emma climbed onto his lap while Noah leaned against him. They looked curiously at the papers on the table. Mr. Grant smiled warmly at them. "You two are very lucky children. Your father is about to give you a life you never imagined." Daniel held them close, still stunned. "What does this mean for us?" he asked the lawyer quietly. "It means," Mr. Grant explained, "you are now the owner of multiple properties, businesses, and accounts. Everything is legally yours. We have been waiting until your children were old enough to begin schooling, as your grandfather wished, before handing this to you. Now the time has come." Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed. "I have nothing, and now you tell me I have everything. How am I supposed to understand this?" Mr. Grant leaned forward. "You have already shown us who you are. You worked hard, loved your children, and never gave in to bitterness. This wealth was meant for someone exactly like you. All you need to do now is accept it. That night, Daniel could not sleep. The twins slept peacefully beside him, but his mind was full of racing thoughts. He remembered the cold nights when he gave up his food for them. He remembered Emma's tears at school and Noah's brave little words to comfort him. He remembered the cruel eyes of his in-laws as they shut the door on him. And now, suddenly, the world was telling him he had power, riches, and security beyond measure. The next day, Mr. Grant invited Daniel and the twins to his office downtown. For the first time in years, Daniel wore a clean shirt and combed his hair neatly. He held his children's hands as they entered the tall building. Everything felt unreal. The shiny floors, the polished desks, the way people greeted them with respect. Inside the office, documents were placed before him. Photos of properties, lists of accounts, and details of businesses, all bearing his name now. Daniel sat there quietly, unable to speak. Emma whispered, "Daddy, is this our house?" pointing to a picture of a large, beautiful home. "Yes," Mr. Grant said with a smile. "It can be if your father wishes." The twins' eyes sparkled with excitement. Daniel looked at them and finally let out a deep breath. For so long, he had only prayed for enough food and a roof. Now he had the power to give his children everything he once thought impossible. But even in that moment, Daniel's heart reminded him of something. Wealth could provide comfort, but it was not what had kept them alive. It was love, sacrifice, and faith. He vowed silently never to let riches change his values. When they left the office, Daniel stopped on the street, looking at the sky. "Claire," he whispered softly, "I wish you could see this. I wish you could see that your children will never suffer again." He felt tears roll down his face, but they were not from sorrow. They were from relief and gratitude. The days ahead promised great changes. A new home, a new life, and security for the twins. But Daniel knew there would also be challenges. Wealth could attract people back into his life, the same people who had abandoned him when he had nothing. He would have to be careful. For now, though, he held Emma and Noah close as they walked back to the shelter. The children laughed, imagining big rooms and gardens to play in. Daniel smiled at their joy, but deep inside, he was still the same father who had slept on benches, given up meals, and whispered hope in the darkness. Money had found him, but his real treasure was walking right beside him. And so, without knowing it, Daniel had stepped into a new chapter of his life. The poor father who had been thrown out with nothing was now the heir to a fortune beyond imagination. His in-laws had no idea what was coming. Daniel's life changed almost overnight. One week he was standing in line at the shelter, waiting for a bowl of soup for his children. And the next week he was stepping into a home so large it felt like something from a dream. The house was on the edge of the city, with wide gardens, tall windows, and rooms filled with light. Emma and Noah ran through the hallways with wide eyes, their laughter echoing off the marble floors. "Daddy, is this all really ours?" Noah asked, his voice filled with wonder. Daniel knelt down, looking into his son's eyes. "Yes, my boy. This is our home now. But remember, it's not the house that makes us rich. It's the love we share." Emma threw her arms around him and said, "We'll make this place full of love then." Daniel smiled, knowing she meant every word. Though the sudden wealth brought comfort, Daniel remained cautious. He did not want his children to grow spoiled or forget their struggles. Each morning he still packed their school lunches himself and walked them to the bus. At night he still read them stories, reminding them of kindness, respect, and gratitude. The money had changed their surroundings, but Daniel refused to let it change their hearts. But news of Daniel's inheritance did not stay quiet for long. Within days, newspapers picked up the story. Poor mechanic inherits $200 million fortune. Neighbors whispered. Strangers looked at him differently, and soon even the in-laws heard about it. The Westons were stunned. Mr. Weston nearly dropped his glass of wine when he read the headline. "Impossible," he muttered. "That man was living in a shelter. How could he suddenly have more than us?" Mrs. Weston felt her pride burn like fire. For years she had looked down on Daniel, convinced he was worthless. Now the same man she had thrown out of her home was wealthier than she could ever imagine. "We must speak with him," she said quickly. "For the children's sake." Perhaps we were too harsh. But their sudden change of tone was not from love, it was from greed and shame. They feared how society would judge them for rejecting their own grandchildren's father. A week later, Daniel received an unexpected visit. He opened the door to find his in-laws standing there dressed in fine clothes, wearing forced smiles. Emma and Noah froze behind him, unsure of how to react. "Daniel," Mrs. Weston began sweetly, "we've missed you and the children so much. We made mistakes. Please let us come in." Daniel stood quietly for a moment. His mind flashed back to the night they had pushed him out into the cold, when Emma cried and Noah tried to be brave. His heart hardened, but he spoke calmly. "Why are you here now?" Mr. Weston cleared his throat. We only wanted what was best for the children. We may have been wrong in how we handled things. But family should be together, don't you agree?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "Family doesn't turn its back when times are hard. Family doesn't slam doors on children who have lost their mother." His words were steady, but there was pain behind them. The twins peeked out from behind him. Emma whispered, "Daddy, do we have to see them?" Daniel gently stroked her hair. "Only if you want to, my love. Nobody will ever force you again." The Weston smiles faded as they realized Daniel was not the broken man they once knew. He was stronger now, with a confidence that came not from wealth but from surviving hardship. Still, Daniel did not shut them out completely. He allowed them to visit, but on his terms. They could not insult him, control the children, or look down on him ever again. The balance of power had shifted, and they knew it. Over time, Daniel's focus moved away from the Westons and toward building a better future. He invested part of his inheritance into education programs for children living in shelters, just like Emma and Noah had once experienced. He visited those places often, fixing broken toys, sharing meals, and encouraging parents not to give up. One evening, as he tucked the twins into their new beds, Emma said, "Daddy, I like our new house, but I like the shelter too. We had people there who cared." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, sweetheart. That's why we will keep helping those people. Money is not only for us, it's for making life better for others." The next morning, Daniel invited several shelter families to his home garden. He arranged games for the children, food for everyone, and laughter filled the air. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. But peace did not mean forgetting the past. Whenever the Westons appeared, dressed in their fine suits, trying to act friendly, Daniel saw through them. He remained polite but firm. "Respect is not bought with money," he told them once when they made a sly comment. "It is earned by how you treat people when they have nothing." The twins grew stronger in this new life. Emma blossomed in school, winning awards for her kindness and leadership. Noah found joy in drawing, sketching stories of a father and children who never gave up. Teachers admired them, not because they were rich, but because they carried humility and compassion, qualities they had learned from their father. Daniel often sat alone at night reflecting on everything. He thought of Claire and how proud she would be. He thought of the long nights on cold benches, the cruel words of his in-laws, and the endless struggle. Now those memories gave him strength. They reminded him never to waste the second chance life had given him. The story of Daniel Hayes became well known. People admired him not just for his fortune, but for the way he used it. He was invited to events, asked to speak about resilience, and respected by many. But at home he remained the same father who cooked breakfast, helped with homework, and kissed his children goodnight. The Westons, however, lived with regret. Every time they saw Daniel surrounded by respect and love, they remembered the day they chose pride over compassion. They had lost their chance to truly be family. Daniel's wealth had given him power, but his true strength came from never forgetting who he was when he had nothing. He carried that lesson in his heart, teaching it to his children every day. And so the poor father who was once thrown out into the cold stood tall in his new life. Not because of the millions in his bank, but because he had endured, loved, and risen above the cruelty that once tried to break him. Daniel's story reached its final turning point when peace and stability finally became part of his daily life. No longer did he wake up worrying about food or shelter. Instead, he woke up to the sound of birds outside the wide windows of his new home, and the laughter of Emma and Noah running through the halls. He would stand for a moment watching them, remembering the cold nights when all three had huddled under thin blankets. The contrast was so sharp that it often brought tears to his eyes. But wealth had not changed Daniel's heart. He still rose early to prepare breakfast with his own hands, refusing to let servants take over completely. He still tied Noah's shoes, brushed Emma's hair, and reminded them to always say thank you. He wanted them to grow up grounded, knowing that kindness and humility mattered more than gold or marble floors. The twins thrived in their new life. Emma joined the school choir, her sweet voice filling the auditorium during performances. Noah discovered a love for painting, filling sketchbooks with colorful pictures that told stories of family, hope, and resilience. Their teachers praised not only their talents but also their gentle manners. "Your children are a reflection of you," one teacher told Daniel. He smiled, knowing that their late mother Claire would be proud. Meanwhile, Daniel turned much of his energy toward helping others. He could not forget the faces at the shelter, the children who shivered at night, the parents who worried about feeding them. He donated large sums of money to improve shelters, build new ones, and provide education for children who had no schools. But he did more than write checks. He often visited in person, sitting with families, fixing broken toys, and telling them that life could turn around. "I know what it feels like," he would say gently. "Never give up." People began to admire Daniel for his generosity, but he never sought fame. He told reporters, "I am not special. I am just a father who tried to protect his children. The real heroes are the people who keep going, even when the world turns its back." Back at home, the in-laws still hovered in the background. They visited sometimes, always dressed in expensive clothes, always trying to sound kind. But their smiles were stiff, and Daniel could see the regret in their eyes. They had once thrown him and the twins into the cold night, and now they stood awkwardly in his warm, welcoming home. One afternoon, Mrs. Weston tried to explain herself. "We only wanted the best for Claire and the children," she said softly. "We did not understand what you were going through." Daniel looked at her calmly. "The best is not found in money or luxury. The best is in love, in patience, in standing by each other when life is hard. That night you chose pride instead of family. That is something my children and I will never forget." His words were not cruel, but they were firm. The Westons lowered their eyes, realizing they had lost something that no amount of money could buy: the trust and love of the family they had rejected. Emma and Noah, however, did not hold hatred. They were children, their hearts softer. They treated their grandparents politely but kept their distance. They had found safety and joy with their father, and that was enough. As the years passed, Daniel became known not as the poor man who became rich, but as a man who carried his wealth with humility. He started foundations for single parents, gave scholarships to orphans, and opened workshops to train people in skills that could help them earn a living. He remembered every rejection, every door closed on him, and he wanted to make sure others had doors that opened. But at the center of everything was always Emma and Noah. He never let business meetings or social invitations come before them. If Emma had a performance or Noah had an art show, Daniel was in the front row clapping the loudest. When they came home, they always knew they could find their father waiting with open arms. One evening, years after leaving the shelter, Daniel sat in the garden with his children. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Emma leaned against him, now a teenager, with a soft smile. Noah sat beside him, showing a sketch of the three of them together under a big tree. "Daddy," Emma said quietly, "do you ever think about the nights we slept outside?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart. I think about them often. And do you know why? Because those nights taught us how strong we are when we stay together. They remind me never to take this life for granted." Noah added, "We were poor then, but we were still happy sometimes. You made us laugh even when things were hard." Daniel hugged them both tightly. "That's because happiness doesn't come from money. It comes from love, and I will always love you more than anything else." The children smiled, and for a long time the three of them sat in silence, watching the sky grow darker. Daniel thought of Claire again, whispering in his heart, "We did it. They are safe, they are strong." His in-laws watched from afar, carrying the weight of their mistakes. They lived with the knowledge that the man they once despised had risen above them, not because of wealth, but because of his character. Daniel never sought revenge, but their own hearts punished them more than he ever could. In the end, Daniel's greatest inheritance was not the $200 million, nor the houses or businesses. It was the bond he shared with his children, a bond forged in hardship and strengthened by love. Money could build walls, but love built bridges. Money could buy comfort, but love gave meaning. Daniel Hayes had walked through fire, rejected and humiliated, but he emerged stronger, carrying his children in his arms and his head held high. The world now knew his name, but to Emma and Noah, he was simply Daddy, their protector, their teacher, and their greatest treasure. And so the poor father who had once been thrown into the cold with nothing found himself richer than he ever imagined, not because of the fortune he inherited, but because he had never let go of the love that guided him through every storm.